Why you wouldn't survive a Viking winter. A Viking winter in 9th century Scandinavia lasted 8 months, dropped to minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit, and killed 30 to 40% of people before spring. No grocery stores, no heating systems, no antibiotics, just you, your family, whatever food you stored in September, and 240 days of darkness, cold, and starvation before the ground thaws enough to plant crops again. Modern people think they could handle it because they've experienced winter. You haven't. You've experienced winter with central heating, 24-hour supermarkets, and modern medicine. A real Viking winter would kill you within 6 weeks. Here's exactly how you'd die and why Vikings survived what would destroy you. Week 1, you realize you don't have enough food, and it's too late. The first snow falls. You're in a Viking longhouse in Norway with your family. You look at your food stores: dried fish, salted meat, grain, root vegetables stored in a pit. It looks like a lot. It's not. Here's the math that kills you. You need 2,500 calories per day minimum to survive a Scandinavian winter where you're burning energy constantly just staying warm. That's 180,000 calories per person for a 6-month winter. A family of 5 needs 900,000 calories stored before the first snow. Vikings knew this. They spent summer and fall in obsessive food preservation, fishing, hunting, slaughtering livestock, smoking meat, drying fish, salting everything, storing grain, pickling vegetables. A typical Viking family would store 400 miters, 500 pounds of dried fish, 200 miters, 300 pounds of salted meat, 500 pounds of grain, and as many root vegetables as their storage pit could hold. You didn't do this because you don't know how. Drying fish properly requires specific weather conditions, precise salting ratios, and knowledge of when fish has dried enough to store, but not so much it becomes inedible. Salting meat requires exact salt-to-meat ratios. Too little, and it rot. Too much, and it's inedible. Storing grain requires keeping it dry and protected from rodents. You've never preserved food for 8 months of survival. You'd mess it up. By week 1, you realize your food stores are inadequate. Maybe you have 60% of what you need. Maybe 70%. It looks like enough because you've never had to calculate 8 months of calories. Vikings did this calculation every year because failure meant death. They knew exactly how much food equaled survival. You're guessing. And here's the devastating part. It's too late to fix it. The ground is frozen. The fish have migrated. The game has moved to lower elevations or entered hibernation. The window for food gathering closed in September. You missed it. Now you ration what you have and hope it's enough. It won't be. Week 2, 3. The cold becomes your full-time job. Modern winter means walking from your heated house to your heated car to your heated office. Viking winter means maintaining fire 24/7 in a longhouse where the temperature inside is 35 to 45 degrees Fahrenheit and outside is minus 20 degrees Fahrenheit. Vikings spent the entire summer cutting, splitting, and stacking firewood. They knew which trees burned hottest and longest: oak, ash, birch. They knew how to split wood so it dried properly. They knew how to stack it so air circulated and prevented rot. They built dedicated wood stores that held tons of firewood. You don't have this knowledge or this wood supply. You try to gather firewood in winter, which is exponentially harder than summer cutting. Frozen wood is harder to split. Deep snow makes transportation brutal. Your hands go numb after 20 minutes outside. What takes Vikings 3 hours in summer takes you 8 hours in winter and produces half the wood. And here's the killer. You can't let the fire go out at night. Vikings operated on a rotation. Someone was always awake, tending the fire. If you fall asleep and the fire dies, the longhouse temperature drops below freezing within 3 hours. You wake up, If you wake up to ice forming on the inside walls and a cold so deep it takes hours to build the fire back up while you're already hypothermic. By week 3, you're exhausted. You're burning 3,000 plus calories per day just gathering wood. You're in caloric deficit, losing weight, getting weaker, and winter has barely started. You won't. By week 4, you're developing scurvy from vitamin C deficiency. By week 5, your gums are bleeding and your old wounds are reopening. Here's why Vikings didn't get scurvy, and you will. They ate things you won't eat. Liver from preserved meat contains vitamin C. Fermented fish contains enough vitamin C to prevent scurvy. Vikings knew this through trial and error. Families that didn't eat these things died. Families that did survived. You don't eat liver. You think it's disgusting. In a Viking winter, liver is medicine. A 3-ounce serving of beef liver contains 14 milligrams of vitamin C. Not a lot, but enough to prevent scurvy if eaten weekly. Vikings ate organ meats regularly. You've been eating the muscle meat and throwing away the organs. You won't drink pine needle tea. You don't know which pines are safe. White pine, spruce, fir, versus toxic. You, ponderosa. Vikings knew. They'd send children to gather pine needles and make tea that tastes terrible but prevents scurvy. You're trying to survive on your stored food and nothing else. By week 5, your body is breaking down. Scurvy causes your connective tissue to fail. Old scars reopen because the collagen holding them closed dissolves. Your gums bleed constantly. Your teeth loosen. You bruise from the slightest touch. You're lethargic and depressed from vitamin deficiency. They're eating their gross preserved fish that you refuse to eat because it smelled bad. That fermented fish contains the vitamins keeping them alive. You chose starvation over food that offended your modern palate. Week 6-8. Respiratory infection kills you living in a smoke-filled longhouse with poor ventilation. Breathing in wood smoke 16 hours a day, with no antibiotics and a weakened immune system from malnutrition, you're getting a respiratory infection, and it's going to kill you. Here's what Viking longhouses were actually like. Smoke from the central fire filled the entire structure, but 70% of the smoke stayed inside. Vikings had chronic respiratory issues. Archaeologists find evidence of lung damage in Viking skeletons. They survived because their bodies adapted from childhood, and they had immune systems not compromised by modern hygiene. Your modern immune system is a liability. You grew up in a sterile environment with antibiotics and vaccines. Your immune system never had to fight serious bacterial infections. Vikings grew up exposed to everything. Their immune systems were battle-hardened. When you get bronchitis from smoke inhalation, your body doesn't know how to fight it effectively. By week 6, you have a persistent cough. You're coughing up discolored phlegm. Week 8, you have a fever. Your body temperature regulation fails. You're simultaneously burning with fever and shivering from cold. Vikings would treat this with honey, antibacterial, certain herbs, anti-inflammatory, and rest near the fire. You don't know which herbs. You might not have honey because you didn't think to store it. You can't rest because you're the one maintaining the fire. There's no one else to do it. The infection spreads to your lungs. To pneumonia sets in. Without antibiotics, vitamin deficiency, exhaustion, and constant cold stress. Vikings with the same pneumonia have a 60% survival rate because their bodies are adapted. You have a 30% survival rate because your body isn't. This is how you die. Respiratory failure in a freezing longhouse in month 2 of an 8-month winter. If you somehow survive to month 3, the psychological collapse modern people have never experienced months of darkness and isolation. The sun barely rises above the horizon in northern Scandinavia in winter. You get 3-4 hours of weak daylight. The rest is darkness. Seasonal affective disorder would destroy your mental state. Your brain's serotonin production drops from lack of sunlight. You become clinically depressed by month 3. Vikings dealt with this through social rituals, storytelling, crafts, music, communal activities in the longhouse. These weren't entertainment, they were psychological survival mechanisms. But you're too exhausted for social activities. You're spending all your energy gathering wood, maintaining fire, and trying not to starve. You're alone in your head for 20 hours a day in darkness. Modern people can't handle 48 hours without their phone. You're facing 90 days of darkness with no distraction, no entertainment, no hope except waiting for spring. Vikings had cultural frameworks for surviving this. Shared stories, religious beliefs, communal work. You have Netflix and TikTok, neither of which exist in 9th century Norway. Your brain wasn't built for this isolation. Psychological collapse accelerates physical decline. Depression suppresses immune function. You stop caring about maintaining the fire properly. You eat less because you've lost appetite. You sleep more because there's nothing else to do, which means the fire dies more often. You're giving up without realizing it. Month 4 minus 5. Starvation begins because you rationed wrong. Remember week 1, when you realized you didn't have enough food. Now you're facing the consequences. It's February. You have 3 months until the ground thaws. Your food stores are 80% depleted. The math doesn't work. Vikings rationed perfectly because they'd done this their entire lives. They knew exactly how much food per day would last until spring. They knew which foods to eat first, items that wouldn't store as long, and which to save, dried goods that lasted longest. They knew that some hunger now was better than starvation later. You rationed based on feeling hungry. You ate. You didn't do the calculation. 180,000 calories needed, divided by 240 days, equals 750 calories per day. If you're at 50% food stores by month 2, you can't survive on 750 calories per day while burning 3,000 calories maintaining fire and staying warm. Your immune system has completely collapsed. You're cold all the time because you don't have enough body fat for insulation. Your cognitive function is impaired. You make mistakes with the fire, with food storage, with basic survival tasks. Vikings would be hungry but functional. They rationed correctly. They're thin, they're tired, but they're alive. You're dying because you didn't understand the math of survival until it was too late to fix. Why Vikings survived what would kill you. The difference isn't toughness, it's knowledge. Vikings weren't superhuman. They were humans with specific survival knowledge passed down through generations living in extreme conditions. They knew exactly how much food to store per person per winter month, which preservation methods worked for which foods, how much firewood burned per day, and how much to stockpile, which wild plants prevented scurvy, and where to find them in winter, how to treat respiratory infections with available resources, how to ration food to last the entire winter, how to maintain psychological health through dark months, how to organize communal labor so everyone survived. You have none of this knowledge. You have modern knowledge, useless in 9th century Scandinavia. You know how to use a smartphone. Vikings knew how to survive 8 months of winter darkness without modern technology. Your knowledge is incompatible with your situation. The survival skills required are generational. Viking children learned from age 5 how to preserve food, maintain fires, identify edible plants, and ration supplies. By age 15, they could survive a winter independently. You're starting from zero in September before your first winter. You'd need 10 years of training to survive what they handled routinely. And here's the brutal truth. 30 to 40% of Vikings didn't survive winter in bad years. Despite knowing everything about survival, having correct food stores, proper firewood supplies, and cultural knowledge, they still died. Harsh winters killed even the prepared. You, unprepared, have functionally zero chance. The Vikings who died were the ones who made small mistakes in preparation or got unlucky with illness. You'd make massive mistakes because you don't know what you're doing. You wouldn't survive to January. It would be this: being adopted into a Viking family and following their instructions exactly. Don't trust your instincts, trust their knowledge. Eat the gross fermented fish. Drink the pine needle tea. Maintain the fire obsessively. Ration the food they tell you to ration. Work when they work. Rest when they rest. Your modern knowledge is a liability, not an asset. Everything you think you know about survival is wrong for this environment. Your instinct to eat when hungry kills you by March. Your instinct to sleep when tired kills you when the fire dies. Your instinct to reject unpleasant food kills you from scurvy. Vikings survived by suppressing instinct and following proven protocols. You'd survive by doing the same, treating their knowledge as absolute law and your instincts as unreliable. But even then, your modern physiology is a disadvantage. Your gut biome adapted to processed food, your muscles not conditioned for constant physical labor, your psychology not built for darkness and isolation. All of these make you more vulnerable than someone raised in these conditions. A Viking winter wasn't just cold, it was an 8-month survival test that killed 30 to 40% of people who spent their entire lives preparing for it. You, with zero preparation and modern biology adapted to comfort, wouldn't make it to New Year's. The cold wouldn't kill you. The starvation, disease, vitamin deficiency, and exhaustion would kill you long before spring arrived to prove you'd failed.